Oh yeah! Hey everybody, welcome back to Flat Top Gaming. My name is Kyle and welcome to part 2 of my video tutorial of how to use Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars RPG's narrative dice mechanics. If you missed part 1 or haven't gone and seen it yet, go ahead and click on the video right over here and that'll take you to it. I highly suggest you take a look at that one first. We're going to, I talk about the different symbols that are used, some of the things that they mean, and now we can really, once we get that the foundation of the symbols under our belt, we can start looking at the actual dice themselves and different things that the dice mean, how they work together, things like that. So, hey everybody, let's get started. Kyle from the future here. I realized when I was going back and editing this video that I forgot one of the first things I wanted to talk about, and that's that in the core books, if you really do not want to go out and buy the special looking dice, in the core books there is a conversion table, in fact this one right here, that you can use to just roll your standard polyhedral die, or regular D8, D6, D12, and look at the table for the particular die you're supposed to be rolling and see what symbols there are. So I suggest getting the narrative dice, but if you really don't want to spend money on them, here's an alternative for you. Now, back to past me. So just like the symbols are broken into good symbols and bad symbols, the dice are also broken into good die and bad die. There are three main good die: the ability die, proficiency die, and boost die. And there are three main bad die: the difficulty die, the challenge die, and the setback die. Now there's a third category of die, and that's the force die. The force die is neither good nor bad. It goes both ways. So the first good die is the ability die. This is your, I hate to use the word twice, but it's your raw ability to do something. In the Star Wars RPG system, you have your characteristics and your skills, just like with almost every other RPG out there. And you can always do something. You don't have to be trained in a skill in order to try and attempt it. So if you have a characteristic, say your characteristic is 2, you have a brawn of 2, whatever, that average strength, you have a brawn of 2. If you're not trained in a brawn-based skill, you're getting 2 green die, 2 ability die. Again, your raw ability to do something. For example, I'm not a trained kickboxer. However, I am strong enough that if I were to try and kick somebody, I could probably do it. I would get 2 green die on that check. The second good die is the proficiency die. This represents years of training and dedication to your craft, to learning the skill that you need in order to actually accomplish the task better. And this is represented by the yellow die. Now, the proficiency die is the only die in the entire game that has the triumph symbol, which we remember from the last video means something really, really good happens. So the only way that you can triumph in a check is if you are proficient at that skill. The third good die is a boost die. Now, boost and setback, I'll talk about in a few minutes, are not based off of your skills or your abilities, but rather are based off of narrative and mechanical advantages that are generated from previous checks or from the setting, things like that. So if, say, you and I are playing, we were both players, and you made a check and you had extra advantages left over, you could choose to give me a boost die on my check. Narratively, what would that mean? You shot at the stormtroopers, and when you shot at them, you scared them out of their cover, giving me a nice clean line of sight, nice clean shot on them. That would be a boost die. It's something that's, again, not related to your skills or your ability, but rather a situational or mechanical advantage to the scene. Again, this could be things like they could be mechanical things like having a scope on your rifle. They could be different talents that you have. They could be, you know, use your imagination. So those are the three good die: the ability die, your raw ability to do something; the proficiency die, your training and dedication to a skill; and the boost die, advantages because of mechanics from previous checks, or just the narrative and the story being told. The three bad die are the difficulty die, the challenge die, and the setback die. The difficulty die is the purple D8, and it is one of the most common difficulty or bad dice that you will use during the game. There are 7 levels of difficulty that are present within Fantasy Flight Games system, and they are basically more or less how many purple die you pick up. And each of them has a different name, and I suggest learning the names of the difficulties because it's so much easier when you're in the middle of a game to say, hey, make me an average computers check, than it is to say, hey, make me a computers check with 2 purples. It doesn't matter, no, not really, but I suggest you learn the name. So the 7 levels of difficulty are simple, which is no purple die. This is pretty much only used for initiative checks. Then you have easy, which is 1 purple die; average, 2; hard, 3; daunting, 4; formidable, 5; and the 7th level of difficulty is impossible, which is actually 4 purple die, 4 difficulty die, a red challenge die, which I'll talk about in a second, and the players have to spend a light side destiny point to be able to even attempt it. So what does this mean? This means that if you as a game master are just shaking your head because your player says, I want to try something ridiculous, and you shake your head and you say, that's an impossible task. Well, guess what? They can try it. It'll be very hard for them to succeed, but they can try it, absolutely. The second bad die is the challenge die, and this is the red D12. Just like the proficiency die, the challenge die is the only die in the game that has the despair symbol. So even if you're trying to attempt a formidable task, there's still no chance for despair unless the GM spends a destiny point or upgrades the check, things like that. The challenge die comes into play really whenever despair is possible. And there's a couple times you'll see it pulled out. Number 1 is when a destiny point is used. Number 2 is when you're doing a competitive check. Say you and I are negotiating over something, and the system's very good about putting the dice in the player's hands. So you want to make a negotiation check. Well, my skill in that check is 2 greens and a yellow. So for you, it'd be 2 purples and a red, 2 difficulties, and 1 challenge die. The third time a challenge die can come up is when there's an innate chance for despair. So this is any opportunity where the game master says, you know what, I don't have to spend a destiny point on it. There's no competition going on right now. Something really, really bad can just happen. And guess what? You got to put up with it. So say this one I've been thinking about, for this video, was if your player wants to put on a spacesuit and leap out of his spaceship and try to grab onto the other person's spaceship, well, there's a really good chance for something to go really, really wrong, and that they miss the spaceship and then tumble off into space. So that would be a very high chance for despair. I'd put at least 1 red, if not 2 reds, into that pool. So that's the challenge die, is not to make it harder, but to up the ante. The third bad die that you can add to your pool is the setback die, and it is the opposite of the boost die. It is caused by negative effects from the environment or the conditions or the situation, as well as threat that are generated by your allies, or advantages that are generated by your enemies from their previous checks. Again, try and work it in narratively into the story so it actually makes sense. But say for example you're having a blaster fight in the middle of a sandstorm. It's kind of hard to hit people when you've got hot sand being blasted into your eyeballs because of Mother Nature. That would take a setback die. It's dark. It's hard to see. That would be a setback die. Someone's behind cover. Setback die. Again, it has nothing to do with the innate difficulty to do the task. It's more of an environmental or mechanical effect to alter the difficulty. Now, when we were talking about the symbols, we talked a lot about things canceling each other out. That's not the case with the die, and I'll go into more detail about this when I talk about how to formulate your pools. But boost die and setback die can both be present in the same check. So those are the good die and the bad die. The third category is just the force die. Now the force die is a white d12, and it is populated by light side pips and dark side pips. Now there are just as many light side pips as there are dark side pips on the die. However, their concentrations are a little bit unique. And I have to say, this die in particular is very well thought out. I applaud Fantasy Flight Games for this one because it's brilliant how they did it. Very much fits in with the lore of Star Wars and things like that. Again, 8 pips of each light side and dark side on there. However, of the 12 sides, the light only occupies 5 of them, which means the dark side has 7. Of those 7, 6 of them are single pips, and 1 of them is a double pip. So the dark side is easy. Statistically, most often when you roll the force die, you'll get a dark side pip, but you'll only get 1. So it's easy to access the dark side, but it's not all that powerful. The light side, of their 5 sides, 2 of them are doubles. I think 3 of them are doubles, and 2 of them are singles, which means you'll access the light side less often, but when you do, the light side of the force is a lot more powerful. I'll have a complete video on the force in this system so that you really go into depth and figure out what that actually means. But when you really break down the force die, it's brilliant. So when is the force die used? Well, obviously in Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion, most of your characters are not force sensitive. So when is this thing used? Most of the time it's used at the beginning of the game in order to generate your destiny pool. The second time that is used is with force sensitive characters when they're trying to activate a force power. And the third time that it's used is actually in the rules for Sabacc, which is Star Wars' version of Blackjack 21, whatever you want to call it. And so in the Star Wars Edge of the Empire Under a Black Sun module that Fantasy Flight Games put out, there actually are rules for how to play Sabacc. If you want to see that in action, go and watch at the first episode of the Under a Black Sun live play that we did on this channel. But go check it out. We did manage to play a couple of hands of Sabacc in that game, and you really got to see how the force die influenced and changed things a little bit during that mechanic. So that's also another motivation that if you do want to play Sabacc in your games, go pick up that supplement because that's the only place it's found. It's not in any of the core books or other supplements right now, and it's free on Fantasy Flight Games website. Just do a quick search for it. It's the Under a Black Sun module. So those are the 3 times the force die is used. And that's really about it. You've got your good die, ability, proficiency, and boost, your bad die, difficulty, challenge, and setback, and your sort of neutral, could be good, could be bad force die. Now in the next video we'll talk about how to actually assemble your dice pool and some tips and hints for how to make it easier to figure out what the heck is actually going on. Until next time, thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Also, leave me any feedback in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you.